Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I'm very honored to be the moderator of this webinar, and I thank you all for your participation. My name is Helmut Gaugic. I'm working at the Environment Agency Austria, and I'm head of scientific management focusing on biodiversity at the Environment Agency Austria. And I'm also the national focal point for the Cartagena Protocol, the Austrian national focal point for the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. So once again, welcome to this webinar on biosafety commitments for the action agenda for nature and people. This webinar will serve the dual purpose of introducing the action agenda to stakeholders in the biosafety community and providing a platform for various biosafety partners to articulate the potential contributions that they could make to support the implementation of the biosafety protocol and achieve better biodiversity outcomes. As you may be aware, parties to the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety are currently negotiating a new post-2020 implementation plan and complementary capacity building action plan. These new plans will require a concerted effort from both parties and other non-state actors to ensure their effective implementation. The action agenda for people and nature, therefore, provides an innovative mechanism for stakeholders to make meaningful commitments and support the advancements of biosafety. This webinar therefore aims at introducing this important platform and facilitating the initial discussions for the online forum on non-state actors' engagement on the action agenda for nature and people, which will run from the 27th of September, so today, until the 10th of October 2021. Once again, welcome colleagues. Before we begin, I would like to invite the Secretariat to provide some information on the technicalities of this webinar, followed by some logistical information on the use of our online meeting system of today. So, Secretariat, Ulrika, I would like to give you the floor for these brief announcements. Please, Ulrika, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Helmut, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, actually, to all of you. Before we proceed, please allow me to note the following technical information to ensure the smooth running of this virtual meeting. To optimize sound quality, please be in a room or closed room alone. Use a headset with a microphone to avoid background noise and to have crisp sound. Please note that participants' microphones will be muted by default to avoid interference during the panelists' presentations. During the question and answer session, the moderator will invite participants to raise their hand if they have questions. Once they do so, the webinar team will unmute them to allow participants to ask their questions. Click raise hand at the bottom of your screen when you see the prompt. Then the host would like to speak, click unmute and we'll be able to hear you. The chat system or question and answer window would also only be used for any technical difficulties during the webinar. The webinar will be from 10:30 a.m. EDT time to 12 o'clock noon EDT time. And we will also share the presentations from the different speakers on the online discussion page. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Ulrika, for these very clear introductory words and technical details. It's always so important for webinars that they function smoothly. And I think you've provided the basis for that. I hope that everything is clear for everybody. I'm checking also in parallel in the chat if anybody raises technical difficulties, but I think so far so good. All understood. We are all well set to get started. And looking at the number of participants, I see constantly rising, currently nearly 120 participants, which is great. And as I have been informed that we have many more registered participants, this number may increase in the course of the next hour and a half. I'm very much looking forward to that. So thank you very much, Secretariat. Distinguished participants, from the outset, I would like to inform you that this webinar is the first of a suite of discussions on biosafety and the action agenda on nature and people. And as a result, this webinar will be recorded, Ulrika mentioned it already, and posted on the convention web page. And in addition to that, a procedural report, which will cover the general discussions and key messages of the webinar, will be compiled. I also want to provide some guidance to help us all make the most of this important webinar. To help the webinar as efficient, to help make the webinar as efficient as possible, I encourage you to be short and precise in your interventions. Maybe if possible, avoid repeating comments or points made by others, because then they will have already been well taken. Make comments only on the issue that is being discussed during the session, so to the point and to the topic. And also be patient and understand that we may face some technical difficulties. Hopefully not, but if they occur, please bear with us and be patient. We'll try to fix everything as fast as possible. I would also like to note that the webinar will be recorded for participants of the online discussions to review it. And those participants who may not have a chance to participate during the live version, during this live version of this webinar now, this will of course be an excellent opportunity for the others also to get on board and to get prepared for the online discussions in the next 2 weeks. So I pause here just for a few moments to see if everything has been clear, which I hope is the case. With that, then I think that we can go directly into the substance, colleagues and distinguished participants. Let us begin our work. I think you all have received and have seen the agenda for this webinar and have seen that we basically have 2 parts. And we will start working with part 1. And for this, I would now like to invite Catalina Santamaria from the CBD Secretariat to take the floor and briefly introduce the action agenda for nature and people and the features, as well as the interoperability possibilities. We are very glad that Catalina is with us for this webinar. She's Senior Program Officer and a Special Advisor to the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. She brings over 20 years of experience of working at the United Nations. After her presentation and a short possibility for questions and answers, colleagues from the CBD Secretariat will complement this by some more technical information. But now, Catalina, you have the floor. We are very much looking forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Well, good morning and thank you, Helmut. This is a great introduction towards this very important agenda on the action agenda. First of all, on behalf of the CBD Secretariat, let me express our deep appreciation to all the participants and the panelists that are joining the webinar today. Let me also recognize that many non-state actors with us have been engaged for many years on the biosafety protocol and the CBD process. And several of them are also much involved in the action agenda for nature and people. And they have already been making voluntary commitments through it in support of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, as well as in advancing the biosafety protocol implementation plan. And I'm delighted that we will be hearing more about the commitments coming from several stakeholder representatives, which have been an inspiration to the global movement on biodiversity. These commitments, together with the other 200 plus commitments that are currently visible on the action agenda, have sparked important feedback loops to catalyze further ambition in response to the urgent call for biodiversity action in this decisive decade for transformation. Now, turning to my presentation, I will be introducing the action agenda with its background and purpose. I'll be turning to the scope of its work and structure. I'll also explain the notion of a commitment, what constitutes a commitment, the type of engagement around the action agenda. I will briefly present the 11 action categories, and I will explain the steps to make a commitment. So let's turn to the next slide. So as most of you have seen, the action agenda was spearheaded at COP14 in 2018 by the governments of Egypt and China. And it is also included in Decision 1434, paragraph 12, where stakeholder groups have been invited and through a decision by the COP to consider developing biodiversity commitments in contribution to the post-2020 framework, and to make such information available on the Sharm el-Sheikh to Kunming Action Agenda for Nature and People. Now, this action agenda is a mechanism that helps to raise public and policy awareness. It inspires subnational and non-state actor commitments, and it catalyzes upward cycles of ambition to 2030 and beyond. It is a whole of society approach, something we've heard repetitively in the post-2020 framework narrative and rationale. It also proves that subnational non-state actors can complement the policy process. And ultimately, it aims to help generate a measurable impact and shift in the management of stakeholders' own activities. Now, you may ask yourself, why is this important to the post-2020 framework, to the implementation plan of the Biosafety protocol, and to the capacity building action plan of the protocol? And I think in one word, it does help show that all these issues under the convention are indivisible. They're all necessary, they're a package. And you will see that I have listed on the slide 8 other points marking and denoting why it's important. And in basic elements, they're all very much stand out, but I think this action agenda shows and encourages others to take action because it's in all of our best interest. And in a more operational point of view, it helps to organize and to explain actions, to examine what are the roadmaps that will help us move forward and advance on our common goals. Next slide, please. As for the structure of the action agenda, the work is grounded on 4 key pillars. This is the policy process, moving from COP14 to COP15 through the presidencies. The stakeholder engagement pillar, looking at the wealth and the mobilization of many stakeholder groups. The outreach and advocacy through a lot of discussions, campaigns, media, and profiling, and the analysis and IT platforms. Now, moving towards our goals and expectations in the short to medium term, we're striving to look at this continued policy support on the action agenda through the policy process. And in so doing, looking at what would be the next guidance from the COP towards the role of the action agenda. We're also looking at growing more coalition-based commitments and looking at smart, measurable actions and roadmaps to meet our 2030 targets. We're looking at campaigns and partnerships, really branching out, looking at different sectors as well to show how all sectors provide meaningful support and contribute to the biodiversity roadmaps and objectives. And really building this platform of interoperability, which my colleagues will elaborate on after my presentation. Now, in the short term, in the past year, we have had several developments. First of all, we've had ongoing discussions under the SBI in the context of the action agenda and the role on review mechanisms. We have been engaging many more non-state actors and their representatives into this work and really profiling what they do, how they do, and what motivates them to take action on biodiversity. We have been building more videos, media materials. We've developed an informal Friends of Action group that have really helped to build a narrative, identify sectors, and plan further activities, including the one that we have that we're doing today, this webinar. And lastly, another very important development has been the commitments registered. We have over 200 commitments with close to 100 of these pledged as coalitions and over 700 organizations already involved. And we have strong links already with the COP15 host country website. Next slide, please. In terms of actors and commitments, many have asked, who is involved in the action agenda? And I think here the answer is all of us. All actors, all stakeholders under Agenda 21 are identified. And this includes as well the subnational local community authorities. This includes individuals. This includes the private sector. So this is very important because this is, again, a whole of society approach. Now, in terms of a voluntary commitment, it's important to note that this is a pledge. This means a pledge to take action that will improve the state of biodiversity through different approaches and measures that the organization may have identified as suitable to undertake, based on science, able to inspire others and align to one or more of the CBD objectives. In addition, there are other criteria that we've identified. It's available on the CBD website, but I think it's important to also note the role of baselines and metrics to be able to trace and be accountable to the commitments that are being made. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the 8 transitions that came from the GBO5 report published in September of 2020. And these 8 pathways that are the transitions that the scientists have indicated necessary for us to meet our 2050 vision of biodiversity have been a strong foundation to the 11 action categories that we have identified for the action agenda. So let's turn to the next slide. So these action categories are listed to the left-hand side of the slide. They have also been broken down in terms of how many pledges have been linked to one of these or all 11 of these action categories. And you will see that the majority of the commitments really hone around conservation, restoration of land ecosystems, as well as in the stewardship for biodiversity. Now, in terms of commitments on biosafety, it's important to note that we have 7 so far. We expect to receive more, and we're very much encouraging that. And we will hear about these specific types of commitments that are coming out of the biosafety category through the participants and panelists that will follow my presentation. Let's turn to the next slide then. Now, lastly, how do you make a commitment? This is a question, again, that repetitively comes up. I think there are 5 key kind of steps that could be addressed in taking and making a commitment. First is assessing and defining the scale of the actions. Second is to really plan and prioritize what are the actions that your organization feels are relevant and representative of the type of measures you want to take. In so doing, examining the trade-offs and examining the resources available, as well as tracking methods to carry out those planned activities. Thirdly, is looking at your actions in light of the action agenda forms. And you will see on our website, we have 4 different forms for different stakeholder groups. There will be a form that best fits your organization. And the recommendation is to use the form that is most suitable to the organization type, whether you're a business or a civil society organization, academia, etc. Fourthly, is to check the criteria. The criteria that we've identified helps to provide kind of a checklist for you to ensure that all the information is completed upon filling the form and submitting that commitment. And lastly is leading by example. And in that context, working with the Secretariat to profile and to showcase your commitments through the different social media and outreach materials that we've developed. Now let's turn to the next slide, which is very quickly, I just wanted to show you a snapshot of how the action agenda link on our website illustrates the Make a Commitment button. And it's the green tab on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that there are 4 different pledge forms. And those are very much self-explanatory and will be the conduit for you to make a commitment. Next slide, please. You also have the option on the website, on our website, to search for commitments that have already been made as per the 11 action categories. And so if you're interested in biosafety commitments, want to see what other colleagues and organizations have pledged thus far, you can do so through our search functions and IT software. And this is a very valuable point for you to see and learn about what other organizations are doing in terms of their efforts to reverse biodiversity loss and reach our 2030 goals. Now, last slide is an illustration of the biosafety commitments, 4 of 7 that have been already profiled on our Action Agenda website. These all have been curated through our teams to make sure that we can profile on social media, we can profile as web stories on our website, we can share with other networks and partnerships so that, again, the role of biosafety is better understood in the context of the overall CBD process. And with that, I just want to thank everyone. I want to show you the website link for those that are interested, and definitely encourage you to join the global movement. This is, we can turn to the last slide where all that information is available. Thank you very much, and back to you, Helmut.
Thank you very much, Catalina, for this great presentation. Thanks for introducing to us the Action Agenda for Nature and People. And thanks for also elaborating how biosafety can be part of this very important achievement and also goal, Action Agenda for Nature and People, and how biosafety commitments, how the biosafety community can interact. We will hear more, a little bit more about the technical information and also interoperability just in a few minutes when your colleagues will complement what you have presenting to us. But before inviting that, I would briefly like to see if there are any questions or comments for from the floor, from the participants. Right now we have 143 participants, which is great. So as mentioned by Ulrika in the beginning, those who would like to raise a point, please use the raise hand function so that I can identify you and briefly give you the floor. Let me briefly check, and maybe also the Secretariat can assist me here if anybody has raised his or her hand. Right now, that does not seem to be the case. So
Helmut,
maybe, yeah.
3 hands raised from Laura, Charlie, and Li Qing. And I'm happy to give colleagues the privilege to speak.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for informing me, because for some reason I don't see it here now on my screen. So that was Laura and the other 2 names?
Charlie and Li Qing.
Okay, so I give the floor to Laura first for a brief question, please.
Wonderful, thank you, Laura. I just allowed you to speak. So when you see the prompt, the host would like you to speak, just click unmute, please, and we'll be able to hear you.
Laura, you have the floor.
Laura, if you see the prompt,
just not work for the moment. Maybe while Laura sorts out how to unmute, can I, just to save time, briefly give the floor to Charlie? Now I see also those who have raised their hands. Apologies. Charlie, please, you have the floor.
Yes, could you please post that website again?
Yes, I'll put it on the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Catalina. And by the way, all the presentations will be shared for the subsequent use by participants anyway. So, Li Qing, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Yeah,
perfectly well. Please go ahead.
Good day to everyone, and thank you, Helmut, and greetings to all. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions, because of course, while we do welcome in principle the voluntary commitments under the action agenda and view it as encouraging, especially in terms of the action that non-state actors can take for biosafety in support of the CBD and the Cartagena Protocol. I wondered if there was a way to, firstly, kind of ensure and also separate out what we view as, of course, parties' legally binding commitments to the Cartagena Protocol, the CBD, and of course the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol on Liability and Redress. Because I think sometimes this may not be so clear in people's minds. And my second question was whether there is a means of verification for the commitments made. Because what we would, I think, be slightly concerned about if there were perhaps, commitments that were not fully reflective of what's happening on the ground, or perhaps commitments, to ensure that we do have robust commitments that, for example, are not greenwashing by industry. So those were my two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jing. Maybe I can turn to Catalina for a brief answer to those important questions. Please, Catalina, go ahead.
Thank you, Helmut, and thank you, Ching. I think these are very, very pertinent questions. In fact, some which have come up during the formal discussions of the SBI. Now, turning to the first question, which had to do with kind of the difference between the parties' legal responsibility and the role of non-state actors. And in this context, the CHM is one of the means to which parties provide their commitments, national commitments. This is also, if we're looking at it from the point of view of decision 1434, this is part of paragraph 11, which calls towards countries to also provide their commitments ahead of COP15. And the process to do so, to differentiate, as you have been mentioning, has been through the CHM. And I believe that there is also the CHM role under the Biosafety Protocol, to which it provides the more legal provisions of compliance through the protocol itself. Now, in terms of the means of verification, turning to your second question, that relate more to non-state actors, this is one area that has been discussed under the SBI context of review mechanisms, given that the legal requirement for the convention is to carry out the review mechanisms for parties. How would that be undertaken with non-state actors has been a question, and there have been different options that have been discussed thus far. I'm not going to go into the details of those options, but I definitely want to mention that this question of verification, of transparency, of accountability, and of progress tracking, of just understanding how the commitment is really shaping. Where is it as per the date of announcement? That is something we are looking at from the action agenda point of view, to ensure that there is meaningful contribution, that there is contribution that will support countries, should that commitment be in connection with more country-related discussions, like in the case of some national and local authorities that may be part of the national commitment, or if they are more global in terms of advocacy, in terms of information exchange, in terms of really bringing awareness. And so the way of verification may be different according to the different commitments, but it is definitely a priority that we are seeking to bring more clarity on, and to demonstrate how this can be seen and provided to the parties and to the public. For example, in the context of the climate process, they prepare a yearbook that shows the different commitments and how those commitments, according to different topics, are progressing. So there are the softer versions, then the more, a bit more formal versions of verification and review. And we are right now looking at the different options and discussing that more closely with the parties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you very much, Catalina, for a very clear answer, which hopefully has provided clarification on the points raised by Ching. I have a final raised hand before we have to move on, and that is by Dr. Trey Govender. Apologies, I will not be able to take more. Everybody who will not have the time, given the time to raise questions here, please do that after the webinar. Secretariat will try to answer all the points, and also, of course, also during the online discussions, there will be ample time to raise questions and also to enter into the discussion. So, Dr. Troy Govender, you have the floor for a brief question. Please try to be brief. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Helmut. I did raise it in the Q&A just to say that I'm just seeking comment on having some sort of formalized structure for biodiversity loss competencies at the university level. Generally what I find is that almost everybody is trying to understand biodiversity and trying to put in place management plans and systems to minimize biodiversity loss. But we need very competent, skilled individuals to do that efficiently. Just your comment on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy. Any response from your side at this stage, Catalina?
Helmut, that may be a question for you as a researcher in the academic world. But from my side, I think there are different ways that different methodologies that are being used, and of course the academic constituencies have been very active. In fact, we have been working with the World Biodiversity Forum, which has been underpinned by the University of Zurich, if I'm not mistaken, a university in Switzerland, spearheaded with many academia, looking at these questions as well, seeing kind of comparing the different methodologies that are out there, looking at different public review papers, academia and literature reviews. And I think in a way, the action agenda could be a very important tool also to generate kind of energize dialogues among academia to address that question you have, Dr. Troy, to ask, what is being used in certain regions, what works, what hasn't worked, what are some of the, maybe there are conceptual terminology issues that are being used differently. But I do believe that dialogue is one of the key unlocking points of the action agenda, that it brings different questions to the front to discuss around like-minded and also other sectors, other participants that may not be as aware of the biodiversity agenda, to bring more clarity on these questions. So do take advantage of that, Dr. Troy. Maybe something we can look at for future webinars. Thank you.
Great, thank
you. Catalina, I can only echo what you have been saying. I think 2 points. First of all, to make the action agenda also more visible and more understandable within the academic community, I think is a very important prerequisite to have dialogue among people in universities, natural history museums, and other institutions, but maybe also use it as a means to communicate between the academic institutions and the government institutions. I'm working in a government agency, and I'm very much inclined always to work with colleagues from academia on biodiversity, biosafety issues, because this link between academia and government institutions in many cases is very important to move things forward. So I hope that is helpful for further steps. Apologies to those who I cannot now give the floor to raise their questions. I know there are many questions. Please use email conversation afterwards, and please also use the 2 weeks online discussion for raising the points. Apologies, Landry, who has asked for the floor, but I cannot give it to you now because we have to move on and stick more or less to the timing so that you all are satisfied also with the timing of this webinar. Thank you very much, Catalina. You have paved the way for some more technical information by colleagues from the CBD Secretariat. And Hassan Malik and Yijuan Wang, both working on IT development and interoperability possibilities for the action agenda for nature and people at the CBD Secretariat, will now give a few more technical details to you and to all of us. So Hassan, Yijuan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Helmut. So hello, everyone. My name is Hassan Malik. I am one of the interns here at the Secretariat for the Action Agenda, working as the IT development and production support.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yixu Wang, and currently I'm interning in CBD Biosafety unit, working with Rika, Catalina, and Hassan, also on the IT development, and also provide support for Action Agenda project. Glad to join the meeting and see you all.
Yeah, so today, actually, we'll be doing a quick demo on a tool we've established here at the Secretariat, known as the Action Agenda Network. And for the demo, what we've done is we've done a pre-recorded video. That'll show you how you can implement the demo within your own organization. But before the video begins, what I want to do is I want to highlight 2 important points. So for the demo, we are using a Drupal CMS to copy and paste the code and run the components for the Action Agenda Network. But I want to point out that you're not restricted to a Drupal CMS. You can pretty much use any CMS of your choice or any different platform that allows you to copy and paste the code and run the components. Now, secondly, I want to highlight the Action Agenda Network GitHub page. This is where the code is available. So what I'll do is I'll copy and paste that into the chat, but we also have that available in the webinar concept notes online. So during the demo, this is where all the code is coming from and all the documentation for that. So I think we can begin the recording.
And what it is, it's simply a way for different organizations to. Hi everyone, my name is Hassan Malik, and I'm one of the interns here at CBD, working under Ulrika and Catalina for the Action Agenda. And what I'm here to showcase alongside my fellow intern Yixuan is a new tool we've created here at the Secretariat known as the Action Agenda Network. And what it is, it's simply a way for different organizations to build their own commitment platform without any resources required, and as simple as just copying a few lines from our documentation that is provided. So what I have on my screen is I want to highlight 3 different parts of our website where we have these components embedded. The first one is the view component, and this pretty much allows us to view a particular commitment by an organization. The second one we have is the search component, and this allows us to filter through the different categories of the commitment. And lastly, we have is the forms component, and this allows us to insert a particular component. Now, here at CBD, we refer to these as widgets. So you have the forms widget, the search widget, and the view widget. So what I'll do now is I'll show you how easy it is. Within just a few minutes, you can create your own platform. Now, here on the screen, on the left-hand side, I'm using a Drupal CMS, which uses the biodiversity tool. And on the right-hand side is the documentation for the different widgets. Now for the CMS, you can use pretty much any CMS of your choice. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly just show you how easy it is to embed a search component or search widget within your own platform. So what I'll do is I'll create a new web page. I've already established that right here. So I'll just name it search widget demo. And going on the right-hand side, all I have to do is go to the search component and copy the code that is given right here, and pretty much just paste it right here, and click Save. And there we go. There you have the Action Agenda search on a completely different website using a different domain and without any programming that is required. Similarly, if we can go ahead and create one for the Forms widget as well. So again, if you go on the documentation, go to the Forms on the right-hand side, scroll down to our script, the code, just copy that, and again go to our CMS and just do a demo title, demo form, and paste that into our CMS, and again just save it. And there we go. Again, without any programming, on a completely different website and a different domain, you have the Forms component embedded onto here. And I'll pass it on to Yishwen, who will actually demo how you can implement the View component.
Hi, I'm Yishun Wang, currently an intern working on IT development and product support on Action Agenda. And following my colleague Hassan's work, I will introduce the instructions on how to plug in View widget. So now on the left side of my screen, you can see the Drupal website where we are going to create or edit the page for convenient viewing. And on the right side is the Action Agenda component documentation that we'll use later for the View widget plugin. So what we are going to do for the first step is go to the Drupal website here and find the text format here. We will choose full HTML as our option. And then we go to the right side documentation where we can see the basic description of the View widget and its installation step. To install it, we scroll down to this code fragment, copy it, and go back to the Drupal website here, go into the text field. First, we'll click on the source button, and then we paste the code here. And we go below, click on the Save button, and now a new page is created. And initially, you will find 404 action not found error because we need a specific action ID to redirect to the corresponding commitment. So how can we find that action ID? Let me take this as an example. So this page is one of the commitments in our CBD website, and you can pay attention to this URL. What we need to take is this part, including the question mark, action, short bar, ID, equal to, and a number string. So we can take it as a whole and copy it, then go back to the Drupal website page URL and paste it here. And we press enter. So here we are. Now we can get access to the contents of the commitment in details. So that's how we plug in the View widget and input the corresponding action ID. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Hassan and Yujuan, for a very clear presentation. I'm not sure if you are finished. I was just jumping in, Hassan.
I think that's it for our presentation.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
No, thanks for this very clear presentation. Exchange of information, sharing information, and interoperability is so important. Me being not the most skilled IT person, I'm sure that it probably would need also to do some work on one's own to see how it functions. But I think from what you have shown, it's already very clear what the benefits of this tool in fact is, and what colleagues and participants to this webinar could definitely do interesting things with this tool which you have been developing, and which serves a lot for the purpose for the action agenda for nature and people. That is great. Let me briefly see if there are any technical questions at this stage, although of course I also invite colleagues and participants to check it out for themselves, and maybe then see what sounds difficult, maybe then at the end rather easy to perform. So I'm not sure if Landry Ngayemena Nogopa, who still has raised her hand, maybe this is a question to Hassan and Yishuan. Landry, you have the floor.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Well, I'm Landry Ngayemena from Cameroon, but I live in Mali for my studies. I'm actually climate advocacy and Master of Science degree. Well, I have a question. Okay, first of all, I'd like to know how can all the young people worldwide or in Africa can engage to end biodiversity loss. Secondly, I'd love to know what is the future we really want. I'm trying to say we, I'm talking about, when I say we, I'm talking about the stakeholders, the government, the business, and the entire civil society. Also, I'd love to know, how do we define a sustainable future for all? That is all I'd like to know.
Thank you very much, Landry, for your questions, which of course are very pertinent, but also very broad with respect to what they are aiming for. So I would like to invite you very much to participate also in the subsequent online discussions, where these broad and very important questions can be raised again by you. Maybe you will then invite some discussions by colleagues and participants. We have heard a very technical presentation. Now your question is a bit broader than that. So I would just like to see briefly if colleagues from the CBD Secretariat would provide a brief answer. Otherwise, I would suggest that we take this for the online discussion later on. Catalina, would you like to?
Yes, I'll be very brief. I'll be very brief because it's 3 questions, 3 answers, Landry. Very good questions. On the first, as a young student, please be active. I encourage you to continue your work and your passion on biodiversity. There is a global youth biodiversity network that represents all youth in the CBD context. There are regional chapters, local chapters. We will provide you a link to that network on the chat for you to kind of start your journey through that initiative. Second point on the future we want in the context of biodiversity, my opinion is that this is what is being developed through the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Is something for all parties, governments, and all stakeholders that are part of this all of society approach. So that is an entry point. Also, all that information is on our website, and I will send you the link also on the chat. Third point on what is a sustainable future for all, I would recommend you to see the Secretary General's latest report, Our Common Future, which outlines the priorities that we have in front of us as a global community that the UN is undertaking, and how that reflects the shooting star for the UN in terms of sustainability for all people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catalina. And let me also remind colleagues that all presentations, also the link to this short intro to the technical issues will be shared, and you can look at the details then in a more quiet moment. A final and very brief question by Edelkin Agbebu, and then we have to move on. Oh no, he or she has removed the hand. So in this case, I suggest that we, oh, I see it again. Edelkin, would you like to take the floor? Then brief question, and then we move on. Can you unmute yourself?
Edelkin, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
If it does not work, and in order to be a bit cautious about the timing, I suggest that we move on, and maybe you can raise your question also by email or in the subsequent online discussions. That would be great. Thanks for your understanding. Dear colleagues, let us now, and thanks again a lot to the colleagues from the Secretariat, Catalina, Hassan, Yijuan, for a great job for so clearly introducing to us the action agenda and also technical instruments which can help using it. Thanks to participants and colleagues for your very pertinent, very good questions raised so far. That's what I had hoped for, a very interactive webinar. But let us now start with agenda item 2. With speakers who will highlight the importance of the action agenda and biosafety commitments or potential biosafety commitments to the action agenda from their non-state actor groups. Non-state actors are in the center of our discussion, of course, for today. And in this context, it is my great pleasure to introduce first Mr. Mohamed Elias Kuchuk to provide us with information from an NGO perspective. Mr. Kuchuk is also the co-founder of several non-governmental organizations. He is the deputy president of the Association of the Safeguarding of the City of Hammam Lif, member of the city council of this city, and several technical committees. He's also a regional specialist for Francophone Africa for UNEP Biosafety Clearinghouse BCH project in its phase 3. So, Mr. Kuchuk, you have the floor for your maximum 5 minutes presentation. Then we have a brief Q&A, and that's how we continue. 5 minutes presentation and a short question and answer session. Mr. Kuchuk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Helmut. Welcome to everybody from all the globe. So I'll try to highlight some contributions of NGOs and local governments in biosafety and biodiversity conservation, and highlight also the opportunities to profile work on the action agenda for nature and people. Next, please. So, the Association for the Safeguarding of the City of Hammam Lif have already taken action in 2015 to campaign to stop the pollution of the sea, the Gulf of Tunis. There was a petition and there have been 10,000 signatures collected. You can see this activity in this short YouTube video there. So this is to show that pollution may also endanger biodiversity and is responsible for the reduction of biodiversity and the disappearance of species. Next, please. Also, the Tunisian Association for Taxonomy has played a role in the academic sector to highlight several issues where NGO can play a role in committing to biodiversity and biosafety publication, and also in their international conferences. The EtuTax has already held several international conferences with the aid of Bionet NAFNINET in that time. So we talked about taxonomy and its role in biodiversity, but also the biodiversity as a link to food security. And the last one, when I was president there, so we organized an international conference entitled From Genes to Ecosystems, to show how a single gene may have an impact on the ecosystem. And this may be seen later for the action or impact of LMOs on our biodiversity. Next, please. Also at the local level, the municipality of Hammam Lif have already signed the Edinburgh Declaration in 10 March 2021. This declaration is made to boost, if I can say that, to boost the parties to encourage or to enhance the activities at the local level. This is very important because if I consider my city, for example, if we are just close to a national park of Bukornit, but we have nothing to do in it, we have only centralized at the government level. So this has to be to change. Maybe we have to need a budget line for local governments, for municipalities, in order to act in this field. Next, please. And regarding public awareness, education and participation, this is a very important aspect of the commitments because it is a prerequisite for the implementation of the protocol of Cartagena on biosafety. The government already had a communication plan on biosafety in the case of LMOs. There are also other communication plans regarding invasive species and pathogens. So NGOs and cities and local governments can mobilize the support from the public to participate in public participation for the imports of LMOs, for example. They also may act to raise awareness of issues related to the public, to governments as an interlinkage between government and the general public. Cities, NGOs, and local governments and other non-state actors can promote capacity building, especially to raise awareness on the supplementary protocol on liability and redress, and to facilitate cooperation and interlinkage between governments and the public. This has to be done. It can be done by 2030, so we still have 8 years and it is possible to act. Next, please. Equally, obviously, the UNEP-JEF project has also an impact on governments in order to boost also the governments and parties towards the biosafety conservation and biosafety and the biodiversity conservation, including the commitments of NGOs to support these activities. As you know, the Biosafety Clearinghouse is a pillar for the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. It facilitates the exchange of scientific, technical, environmental, and legal information and experience with LMO, but also assists parties to implement the protocol. So NGOs' commitment to the action agenda could be by 2030 to train people on the use of and awareness of the BCH and the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. This is very important, as we'll see later, and also to support the BCH migration to the new platform. This will happen in November, next November, so we need these NGOs' activities in order to assist these countries to migrate to the new BCH. The target audiences already have been cited by other speakers. So maybe the national authorities are the most important, but other stakeholders and the general public also have their say and should be included. We have also many partners at the government level and also in the general public and maybe other suggestions coming from you. Next, please. So if you look at the status of African countries regarding decision and risk assessments on LMO, we can see that only very few countries have already taken decision on LMOs and risk assessment. In Africa, only quite South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya have some activities around this. And most of these decisions have been taken in 2018. So we need really the actions and the activities of NGOs for the future to run risk assessments and on the number of decisions on imports of using available guidance already available on the BCH. and also sharing these risk assessment through the BCH. The same, next slide, please. The same applies for all developing countries and all countries in the economy in transition and small islands. We have very few decisions made, very few risk assessments. And this is to say that we are quite contaminating our biodiversity if no actions are taken from now on. Next, please. So we have the same scheme about risk assessment. Next slide. So the national biosafety frameworks should be a key to implement the protocol, and NGOs should commit to the action agenda by 2030 to provide these trainings on the development and implementation of legal, administrative, and other measures to implement the protocol, and provide support for parties to carry out biosafety activities set out in compliance action plans. The benefits for governments or parties, they will have fully implemented national biosafety frameworks. LMOs can be regulated and potential risk of LMOs can be addressed to biodiversity of human health. Next, please. So this is to highlight the NGOs and local government who are good listeners and may bring action among individuals and the public on biosafety and biodiversity conservation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for your clear presentation. Thank you for highlighting the importance, the core importance of the Biosafety Clearinghouse, of risk assessments. You also referred to the supplementary protocol for liability and redress and its central role in the biosafety framework. And thank you for clearly outlining what NGOs can do to provide commitment to the action agenda. That has been very important and very clear. And I'm looking if there are any questions or comments from colleagues to what we have just heard. And as I suggested, please use the raise hand function if you would like to raise a question or a comment. I'm trying to see if I find or ask the secretary to assist. I see that someone has raised his or her hands, but at the moment I cannot identify who it is.
Yes, Helmut, we have a hand raised by two attendees, Olaiwola Agoro and Muhibullah Fazli.
Okay, now I think I see it. It's coming a bit later in my, yeah. So Olaiwola Agoro, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've listened to the presentation and I must thank Mr. Mohammed. But my question is a simple one. I want to know what challenges as an NGO they faced in the course of sensitizing or implementing this, this protocol. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mohammed, would you like to briefly answer before I give the floor to Mujibullah? Mohammed?
I think that the first challenge is about the capacity building. I have been in some countries in Africa, and the results already show that we need capacity building for biosafety and biodiversity conservation, because there are many turnovers in the administration, in the administration of biosafety and biodiversity, I think. So these turnovers make that we have already new people coming. And without the input of NGOs, we can install something of a continuation of this effort of capacity building, which can't be handled by governments, unfortunately. So this is the challenge, that maybe NGOs can replace governance in the capacity building aspects of regarding biosafety or biodiversity conservation. Also, the challenges is to involve more, how to say, researchers, scientists, like what has been suggested by our colleague here, Dr. Troy. So NGOs can really put a good link between scientists and the government, because at the government level, we don't have many scientists, unfortunately, except for some institutions that are related to the Ministry of Environment or whatever. But so this is the challenge of NGOs. They take the place instead of the government, and really work on the conservation and the biosecurity or biosafety fields by 2030 in order really to raise these, to reach our targets, let's say.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. That has been a very clear and very good recommendation indeed. We take a second question before we move on, or comment, and this one is by Mujibullah Fazli. Please, Mujibullah, you have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Elias, for your nice presentation. My question is regarding the implementation of Cartagena Protocol. Mr. Muhammad Elias, could you please tell us which activity are highly prioritized for a government to better implement Cartagena Protocol? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I hand over to Mohammed for a brief response, please.
So the response may be the same as the first question, because as I said, in the government, as I saw in some countries, there are several turnovers, so people are not the same. So when you engage for an activity, sometimes you have to start from scratch, because people have gone, have changed, and it is normal that the one person has moved to another position or whatever. And this really make it difficult to put a program in place, to put a project in place. And this is what can be done by NGOs that make, how to say, a continuation in these activities of capacity building. We really need basic capacity buildings in Africa, at least that's what I know best, because I don't know what happens in other countries. But in Africa, especially in Francophone Africa, we need some NGOs, some centers of excellence, maybe, who take this aspect of capacity building. Otherwise, we will not achieve our targets by 2030 or 2050. It will be very difficult.
Thank you. That is indeed a very important role NGOs, but also other actors can play. You rightly pointed to the importance of collaboration and assisting and complementing each other. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thanks for your questions, colleagues, and thank you very much for your presentation and answers also now, Mohammed. And with this, we move to the next presentation. We have 3 more speakers. And the next, I'm very happy to announce Mrs. Sarah Luki from CropLife International. She will provide us information from a private sector perspective. Sarah Luki serves as the Vice President for Trade Policy and International Affairs, Plant Biotechnology, based at CropLife International. She has extensive experience on the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. Sarah, you have the floor. We are looking forward to your brief presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. We are very honored to present on behalf of CropLife International on some of the commitments made by our organization under the Action Agenda for Nature and People today. Very much appreciate you including CropLife International on the agenda. We are a global federation that represents the plant science industry. And some of you who participate in biosafety protocol negotiations will have seen our organization around for many years. We've been working on this issue since it was negotiated over 20 years ago. We have 6 foundational members at CropLife International, 6 companies, but we also partner with a vast global network of organizations in some of the countries in which you are organized. So I would love to go to the next slide and we can take a look at our global network here. So this reflects our reach around the world. Yes, we are a global federation, and here is where we are present in the world. What we try to do is establish positions and supportive policies, and then at the global level, bring those into the countries that you see here represented in this slide. Next slide, please. So what I'll be presenting today is around some of the items that we have pursued over the years in support of biosafety protocol implementation, and specifically those that we have leveraged to support the action agenda for nature and people. As I mentioned, we've been working in this area for a long time. And one of the things that we have noticed is that from the private sector perspective, we are able to provide some unique contributions that others might not be able to, given the fact that many of the products that are in the marketplace today come from our member companies. So one of those areas is connected to information that is shared on the Biosafety Clearinghouse. I'm sure all of you are well aware of the Biosafety Clearinghouse, which is an online platform to facilitate exchange of information on living modified organisms. It's intended to assist parties to comply with their obligations under the protocol. One key element of that is around information on approval decisions by both parties and non-parties. Of course, this is very useful information and a foundational element of the clearinghouse, but it doesn't speak to whether those products are actually in the commercial marketplace and available globally. So one of the things that our member companies have done is looked at the unique opportunity to provide additional information in this area, increase knowledge and transparency around what products are actually used in the world today. We created a database called the Biotrade Status Database in order to share this information. So this information is available on cultivation status, type of commercial approvals around the world, whether products are in fact still in the marketplace. And the idea there is to share that information, link it directly to the Biosafety Clearinghouse so that parties and non-parties globally can add to the kind of information they have on products around the world that are supported by, developed by our member companies, to really understand better, not just the approvals that exist, but those products that are being traded around the world. The idea here is that we have a unique ability to provide that information, and that was something that we couldn't gather any other way. So we have worked with the Biosafety Protocol Secretariat to make that information interoperable with the Biosafety Clearinghouse. Next slide, please. Along those lines, we have also shared information around detection methods on a detection methods database that is intended to support transparency of information in this area as well. So as we know in this world of global trade, harmonization of detection methods information is really important to ensure consistent testing and efficient global trade. To that end, we looked at this as another opportunity for our member companies to provide some unique value and share these detection methods and related materials in an online and searchable database. The idea here is to share this information that is compliant with standardized guidelines towards a path of global harmonization of testing for GM crops and hopefully reduce the potential for any trade disruptions. So again, this initiative was created to be interoperable with the Biosafety Clearinghouse to add to the functionality and information available on that website with information that is uniquely available from our member companies. Next slide, please. Another area that has been very key for us in terms of the action agenda and where we've been able to make key commitments and contributions is around the area of risk assessment capacity building. So our members have made a long-standing commitment through a multi-year project to encourage modernization of risk assessments of LMOs and encouraged regulatory cooperation. And we see that after 25 years of commercialization and approval, there could be some key elements that are useful to all the parties to the biosafety protocol and non-parties alike that we have learned over those extensive years of doing risk assessments. Thus, our experts in the companies that we work with have just recently, in January 2021, published 7 papers in the Journal of Regulatory Science detailing some of the recommendations around regulatory capacity building in risk assessment. We've made those very widely available. This is another commitment to the action agenda to really be present and able to support their use by anyone interested in doing so. We welcome questions or comments from regulatory agencies, from other key partners around the contents of these risk assessment capacity building tools, and we are available to share more information about those tools as well. Next slide, please. I am moving quite quickly through these. Of course, people are welcome to ask questions, and I understand the slides will be available afterwards, but I just want to give everyone a flavor for the types of actions and commitments that we are taking in support of biosafety protocol implementation. One of those is more broad-based than just related to biosafety, and that is around biodiversity writ large. So our member companies have an important role here to share information and track the success of that information in terms of projects and activities and programs that we have undertaken within our member companies to support best management practices to improve and protect biodiversity and contribute to climate change mitigation. This is a newly released report, fresh, hot off the press, and it aims to conclude on some of those selected programs that can be scaled up to support best management practices, and also really create some transparent metrics to share progress over time. We are happy to share that on the website linked to this page. It is a newly produced report. We intend to do that annually, and we'll create some clear and transparent metrics of progress alongside that report and make that available in an annual basis. This is, as I mentioned, newly released. We will start to share that a little bit more broadly, but we're happy to make that available today on the website that you see here. Next slide, please. One last slide of another contribution we have made to the action agenda relates to our effort around the world to promote farmers having equal access to biotechnology and science-based guidance on regulations. So the aim here is to undertake some initiatives to train farmers, train those involved in working in agriculture around some of the key stewardship initiatives that we support at CropLife International. So I have some numbers on here. This is really just to show the breadth of this type of training. The training relates to integrated pest management and responsible use. It relates to resistance management, and much of the work there is through an organization that manages the stewardship work, particularly around resistance management. So what we have here is a contribution to affect behavioral change. That means that we are doing many trainings in person, but we are also using a number of digital social media tools to reach farmers that way as well. It's a long-standing initiative at CropLife International to support product stewardship of our member companies' products and a key pillar of work. Much of what we have done over the last year is look at how we can take that stewardship work and align it with the action agenda directly. Next slide, please. I'd like to leave it there to answer any questions, but thank you for this opportunity to give you a quick snapshot of some of the work that CropLife International undertakes in this area of the action agenda.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this clear presentation, sharing a very new report with us, and also explaining how your data, your information is interoperable, or you have provided in an interoperable manner with the Biosafety Clearinghouse. And again, BCH and risk assessment have proven to be in the center of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. Time is progressing, and but still, I would like to allow for one, maximum two short, very short questions before we move ahead. And I try to see again. Yeah, Charlie Shore, I see, has raised his hand, his or her hand. So please go ahead with a brief question.
Sarah, I noticed that you're targeting 20 million farmers. I assume most of those are in developing countries. But have you had any success with targeting farmers that are have used standard industrial agricultural practices in places like the U.S.?
Thank you for that question. Indeed, our stewardship program is across the globe. So we tend to target developing countries because the capacity is somewhat more limited in some of these issues and around stewardship in particular. However, we work with Bio and CropLife America in the United States to support an extensive stewardship program in the United States as well. One thing for those of you who are interested, you might want to take a look at something called Excellence Through Stewardship. I think it's excellencethroughstewardship.org, and that details our stewardship management practices globally and highlights those in the United States as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the second brief question by Dr. Troy again. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Helmut. Thank you, Sarah, for a good presentation. It is interesting to see the initiatives CropLife is taking to contribute to biodiversity protection. I just want to know, how does CropLife ensure that all those who introduce and use agricultural remedies are doing so in a sustainable manner, and those who approve it have some sort of professional scientific registration or accreditation?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'll say there is that we do our best to ensure that that happens, but of course we play our role and we look to the regulatory agencies to play their role as well. So firstly, I would say the stewardship practices that I referenced in the presentation and referenced through our website on Excellence Through Stewardship demonstrate the type of engagement and monitoring and commitments we look to in our partners around the world to be following through with the types of practices that we want to see put in place. We also work with regulatory agencies around the world to have those be part of a regulatory approach. And we do a lot of work to support capacity building in risk assessment, risk management, stewardship, other areas where we can play our part in making sure that our products are approved safely and used safely around the world.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And finally, but really only for a very brief question, Jing, and then we move ahead. Jing, please, very briefly.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. Just a very quick question. How does CropLife reconcile its biodiversity commitments with some of the your member company products that negatively affect biodiversity, such as pesticides and LMOs? Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Sarah?
Well, I suppose first I would say that there is again a stewardship initiative in place to manage these products, but we also recognize that that we have a role in ensuring that any of the products that are put in the marketplace are used responsibly and safely. We are pleased to say that over 25 years of use of LMOs in particular have no evidence of negative impact on biodiversity, and that is key because of the risk assessment and risk management practices we put in place. And we are taking this role seriously. That's one of the initiatives of this biodiversity report that we're producing, so that we can look at the types of activities we are undertaking, the types of products that are in the marketplace, and monitoring for progress in our efforts to support their use in a changing world around biodiversity conservation and climate change.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks for your presentation once again. Thanks for the questions and the answers. We move on, but before I give the floor to the next speaker, I have to say I apologize. We run a bit behind schedule. Of course, our discussions and presentations are so interesting and so intensive that this may happen, but I would like to apologize to all colleagues who have urgent commitments right at the planned end of this webinar. We will go a bit over time, hopefully not much more than 10 minutes, maximum 15, but I would just like to announce it because we have still 2 more presentations and only 6 more minutes regular time of this webinar. Apologies for that. I hope we will manage. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kamal Kumar Rai from Himalayan Folklore, Indigenous Knowledge and Peoples Network, Federation of Kirand Indigenous Association, Society for Wetland Biodiversity Conservation, Nepal, to provide us with information from an indigenous peoples and local communities perspectives. Mr. Kumar's extensive knowledge of representing IPLCs in Cartagena Protocol negotiations and expert meetings. So, Mr. Kumar, you have the floor. We are looking forward to your maximum 5 minutes presentation. Go ahead. Kamal, we cannot hear you. At least I cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now it's working. It's a bit low, but I think it's working now. If you can speak as close as possible to your microphone, please. Thank you.
So I think this is okay. Welcome for my short presentation. For the IPLC, the nature is the sacred and alive, and the IPLC we can speak with the natures, but today our mother nature is facing different kind of problems and the situation. So that's the I'm just want to sharing. The nature is for us. The nature is very how to say this, connect with their language, our language, and the rituals and religious and ceremony is a symbol and the spiritual, the customs, and this is also the identities, and it's very important for the biodiversity. Next, please. The customary system of the IPLC and the IPLC women and elders, they're very connected and deeply rooted in the nature's lands and waters and territory. The resources for us it is very important. The value of the IPLC and the system is very play a vital role for the traditional livelihoods for us, and that's also very important for the socioeconomic developments and the protecting the biodiversity. The knowledge, the traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and the system that we are passing through the customary practices to the young generation, and that's the harmony with the natures. The next, please. The LMO and the related the biotechnology, that's a very important to understand for the IPLC and the IPLC women's and the youth. The LMO and related the technology may have a positive and negative impact to the other our mother nature's land and waters ecosystem territory that can the harm or that can be the adverse effect to our traditional livelihoods and socioeconomic and cultural issues that are not well known for in IPLC perspectives. So the risk assessment and the risk management of LMO, it should be the participatory research, or is not well designed or framed out in yet. That should be the meat and cultural value of the IPLCs, because I already mentioned the diverse type of the cultural, intangible cultural values, that's the close link with the nature. The technical know-how is not lacking to access the IPLC women and youth, and capacity building and communication education. The knowledge transfers are the key issue the considered for the IPLC and women and youth. Next, please. For this, the commitment and the implementation plan of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, the socioeconomic consideration that the guidance from the CBD created widely used for by the 2030, the women's IPLC and youth from the 7 regions, because we are in the global in 7 eco-region is participating on these issues, and IPLC and women and youth socio-economic consideration. That's the Cartagena Article 26 of the protocols are the key when the LMOs to use or to import, and including the consideration of the territory and land and water and ecosystem that's the use by the IPLC. The knowledge or the technical know-how or scientific transfers is the key to support IPLC women and youth in collaboration and partnership with the IPLC women and youth is the key respect and the traditional knowledge, skills, indigenous technology and innovation of the IPLC. Next, please. The risk assessment and the risk management related training or capacity buildings for IPLCs by 2030 is very important, and for the IPLC women and youth from the 7 eco-region, because there's we indigenous peoples are not well info or have not more information about this. So that's the we want our commitment. The free, prior, informed consent and self-determination and full and effective participation, IPLC women, youth and elders is the key to conducting risk assessment of LMOs. Next, please. For our commitment on this, the agenda for nature and people is the implementation plan for the Cartagena Protocol, and protecting biodiversity and must be the respect our human rights in collaboration and precautionary approach for the risk management and monitoring of LMOs and promote socio-economic consideration of LMOs. These are our commitment, and I thank you very much and for listening me in short my presentation. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much, Kamal, for your very clear and very important presentation. Thanks for sharing the IPLC's perspective. Thanks for clearly outlining also what you expect from the Action Agenda for Nature and People and what you can also contribute to it. That has been very clear, and that is very important. I would like to highlight the attention of participants to the note just provided in the chat by our organizers. Thanks, Victoria and colleagues, for posting, which says that if you don't have a chance to raise a question or answer your question in this live session due to the time limitations, please send your questions to the organizing team, and the email address is provided. So please make use of that, because as I said, we are slowly but surely running out of time, and I again apologize for that. Some of you may have go to other meetings, but briefly also here, I would like to allow for maybe one question, and then we move to the final presentation of this webinar. And the question or comment will be raised by Priscilla Zamalu. Please, Priscilla, you have the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. My question is, how do we relate, or we link GMO, biodiversity, seed security, and the right to food for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. A very important question addressing, again, more broader issues. I don't know if Kamal, who has just given his presentation, would like to respond, or any other of our panel members would like to briefly come in and respond to Priscilla's point raised. Otherwise, we will also take it to our online discussions. Who would like to briefly reflect on Priscilla's point? If that is not the case at this stage, then again, I would like to say from my side, I think these interactions, these interrelationships which you have raised, Priscilla, and where you have rightly asked how this will be put all together and put into context, is indeed very important. It goes beyond probably what we can discuss and solve during this webinar. So I kindly ask you to take this question. Of course, also our organizers will try to respond afterwards, but take this question also to the online discussions, where you may have a couple of colleagues also responding to it, and in fact a very lively and very important discussion may follow from this. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I see two raised hands. Kamal, I see your hand. Would you like to respond? Would you like to say something?
I try to respond, and thank you very much. Very
Please.
important question. So that's the worry for the IPLC, especially the women, because of the food.
Can you speak closer to the microphone, Kamal, please? It's not easy to understand.
Okay, I'm sorry, my voice is very low.
Yeah, now it's functioning well. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's important question. That's for also important for the IPLC, and especially women. Those are still working under the issue of the food security and food system. And we have the indigenous and the food system, and that is the very traditional ways. And that's the indigenous food system. That's for culture and spiritual, the ritual things that may be in the contaminated, and there's the way maybe is not a good chance to offer our ancestors spiritual in future. So how to protect and how to manage that, maybe we can have us the regulatory and precautionary approach for these issues, and that's on the human rights aspects. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And very briefly, I would like to give the floor to Ulrika, who may also reflect on the point raised. Ulrika. Please unmute yourself. Yep.
Yes, no worries. You can go on with the webinar, since I see the timing. So
okay. Again, apologies for the timing, but we now move to the final presentation of this webinar. I still see many people being online, which is a good sign. We will now hear from Mrs. Angela Elaine from the University of West Indies, who will provide us information from the academia's perspective. The role of academia has already been reflected a couple of times during the last 1.5 hours, and therefore this will be a very important final part of this webinar. Angela is a senior lecturer in biochemistry and a program coordinator of the master's degrees in biosafety at the University of West Indies in Barbados. She has extensive experience of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety and as a scientific researcher. So Angela, you have the floor. We are looking forward to your 5 minutes presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Helmut. I guess it's good afternoon, everyone. And I would just like to say that the education agenda and the action agenda are very much intertwined. And therefore, I'm pleased to give this presentation this morning. So next slide, please. I will simply begin with a brief introduction to our program. The MSc and Diploma in Biosafety at the University of the West Indies came out of a UN program in 2014, but it survives today because of the importance of the biosafety frameworks and the need to implement the Cartagena Protocol and use the Biosafety Clearinghouse effectively in our region. It's a 15-month online program for the most part. We do have one face-to-face workshop component, but it has been providing biosafety education within the Caribbean and to some extent, some parts of South America since 2014. Our students come from as far north as Belize, to as far south in South America as Suriname, and all the islands in between. Next slide, please. We have seen that with the shortfall in funding, that most of our students are coming from Barbados. We now have a cohort comprising about 37% of students from Barbados. So we've had up and down enrollment since the program began, and simply because the idea of funding biosafety for education seems to be not something that's very popular at this point in time, and we hope to see that reversed in the near future. So we do have mostly Barbadian students. We do have all students coming with some kind of first degree in the biological sciences. However, we do encourage persons with degrees in other areas like legal aspects, law, social sciences, and so forth. They are also welcome in our program. We encourage professionals who are working because it can be done online, and people who have expertise and experience in biosafety, we encourage those to also join our program. Next slide, please. And so our goal is to create a trained cadre of persons within the Caribbean region in biosafety. And why this is important is simply because our region is prone to the, I don't want to say, to the use of these products indiscriminately and sometimes discriminately, but for the most part, without any regulatory as well as scientific analysis. We want to encourage young persons and students to display the safe use of biotechnology and provide them with the skills and analysis to evaluate and conduct the risk analysis and management necessary for these products. We also need critically to meet the international agreements on biosafety that we've signed, especially the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Next slide, please. So a core concept within our program is really and truly putting the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and hence the action agenda center within our program. We use the idea of the action agenda in building awareness and safeguarding biodiversity. Interestingly enough, our whole concept of safeguarding biodiversity is not something for us in the Caribbean region that we take lightly. Our region is prone to many, not only natural disasters, but also to the threat of loss of biodiversity. And so at the undergraduate level, in the high school level, we are always making sure that biodiversity is a key concept in our programs. And in the MSc program in particular, we look at analyzing the impact of biotechnology on that diversity. We engage in many surveys in terms of the projects the students undertake in making sure the public understands or know what biosafety is. We look at the uptake in knowledge of regulations in biosafety. All of these are actions that we've engaged in the past and continue to do so in the future in the MSc program. Next slide, please. So our students, since we've been doing this program, our numbers are somewhat small because we're a small university, and Barbados is the smallest campus, about 3. The students are engaged in the industrial sector, in sometimes looking at certainly in the food industry. Our students are also engaged in teaching throughout the education sphere, from primary school all the way up to the tertiary levels. They are working in laboratories where they're looking at testing, and also sometimes in the health sector, because we're seeing more and more with the current pandemic, an understanding that biosafety is not only related to the transformation or modification of plants, but also, animals and so forth, and the clinical aspects of that. And so because of that, we are engaged at this point in our program and our history in looking at implementing courses that pertain to food safety and biosafety, clinical biosafety, and climate change and biosafety. So these are things that we are developing down in the pipeline, and we hope to get those within the next year or so integrated into our program. Next slide, please. And so the action agenda for nature and people and the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety is something we take very seriously in our program, in the MSc. This is a brochure here for the MSc Biosafety, and you can go to our university's website and get that link. I forgot to put the link in our presentation this morning. But we commit to the action agendas very seriously in this program. And we continue to increase the capacity for biotechnology and the analysis and looking at the risk and management of that within the region. We inform policy within the Caribbean region because we are engaged heavily in looking at implementing the policies at the local as well as the governmental level and regional level. We have something called the CARICOM organizations that are involved in biotechnology and making sure our biosafety regulations pertain and meet the criteria set internationally. So academic institutions like ours and around the world are key partners to this action agenda. And we hope to continue supporting the action agenda and engaging with persons at the CBD in this effort. At this point, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about our program and the role that academia is playing and can play in the action agenda and the CBD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for outlining the important role academia can and is also dedicated to play. Working with youth, working with students is working for the future, and I think your presentation has made that very clear. Thank you very much for that. So let me briefly see if there maybe is a final question before we conclude this webinar. Already 15 minutes over time. Apologies for that. I'm looking at Hasina Ali, who has not spoken yet. Maybe she's the one to whom I will give the floor finally. Hasina, you have the floor. Can you try to unmute yourself?
Hasina, you should be able to speak now when you unmute yourself.
Okay. As it doesn't seem to work, apologies for that. And in order not to lose more time, Priscilla, who has already asked a question, but maybe a brief final question from your side. Apologies to Hasina, but Priscilla, please go ahead. Can you try to unmute yourself? Again, it doesn't seem to be possible. Sorry for that. But dear colleagues, also in the interest of time and not to keep you waiting for longer. Oh, now it seems to work. Priscilla, briefly, a brief question from your side, then Angela,
Yes,
and then we conclude.
Just a question on food safety and especially street foods and how we can ensure safety. Thank you.
Okay, Angela.
Thank you very much for that question. That's an interesting question. As you know, especially in small island states, street food is a growing and it's part of the culture. When we think about food safety and the biosafety aspect, we look to integrate from the education perspective the general concepts in food safety. So yes, street food is something that probably will be integrated into our program in terms of teaching, but it's broader than that. We are looking at how we educate our young people in diagnosing LMOs, GMOs, looking to use food safely for the larger populations. It's not just about food preparation and so forth. It's more about from a commercial aspect as people engage more with food, agro-processing and so forth, how to distinguish and how to use those items in a safe fashion.
Thank you very much, Angela, for this clear answer. Dear colleagues, with this, I think I would like to briefly conclude our webinar this afternoon, but not without thanking once again Angela for the great presentation and for a brief question and answer session. We have been a maximum around 150 participants this morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it was for you around the world. And we still have more than 100 participants now with us, although we have already 20 minutes over time. I think that shows that this was hopefully a great experience for all of us. For me, it definitely was and is. And I thank you for your insightful presentations, questions and comments. So to all of you, the panelists, but also all the participants, the deliberations today have really been, have provided us with critical inputs that demonstrate that action for biodiversity and biosafety can be taken on every scale and by all actors along the value chain. We have heard from a diverse group of stakeholders, interested organizations, the various ways in which action by non-state actors can be unlocked, and the contributions coordinated also for greater impact even in the future. As indicated during the introduction by me and also by Ulrika, this webinar is being convened to start online discussions on facilitating cooperation on biosafety, non-state actors' engagement for the action agenda for nature and people. And these online forum will now run from today, from the 27th of September. This was the kickoff webinar, and now it's going to run for the next 2 weeks until the 10th of October on the Biosafety Clearinghouse. I encourage all of you to take up these discussions on the online forum and mobilize support for the implementation plan for the Cartagena Protocol and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Make use of this time. The next 2 weeks, you can continue this very important, interesting discussion we have had already today. All participants that make contributions to the upcoming online discussion shall do so in their own personal capacity, unless they explicitly state that their submissions represent the views of the government, of their government or organization. The discussion groups will be moderated, like this webinar. They will be moderated by me, but also by 6 other representatives for the coming 2 weeks to ensure that participants may have the possibility to raise questions and also receive responses to their messages. Please note that for the online discussion, your interventions must and should be relevant to the subject matter. And also please, as you have done today, please introduce yourself in your future postings and try to be concise also during the postings. Thank you very much for your participation today. I wish you a fruitful online discussion, and I, of course, would not like to close without thanking a lot the organizers, the CBD Secretariat, UNDP, all the colleagues who have worked also behind the scenes for the excellent preparations, the technical support, which made my job rather easy. But once again, apologies for going over time. The webinar is now closed. Have a nice remaining day, and please, let's keep in touch. Let's continue this important discussion. Let's work for the action agenda for nature and people together. Bye-bye. It was my pleasure to moderate this event. The webinar is now closed.